other view here, and we're going to kind of get started. I'm going to share my screen. Along the way, as we get rolling, if you don't mind, I did a quick introduction of myself. If you can, just give like a 30-second, 40-second introduction for each of you, and then we'll kind of dive into the subject matter. Harjit, why don't we start with you?
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. My name is Harjit Singh. I lead our marketing ops and analytics team at Lyra Health. Our team focuses on three key aspects of campaign operations, marketing technology, and marketing analytics. And I've personally been in marketing ops for over 15 plus years, and really excited about the topic today. I'll pass it over to Jules.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome. Hi, everyone. I'm Jules James, Director of Marketing Operations at Celigo. I've been in this role for about 4 months, so it's pretty new to me, but owning all of our marketing operations and technology stack across the organization. And like Harjit, have been in the marketing ops role for way too long to talk about. Ryan.
Ryan Nelson, Senior Director of Solution Engineering Team at Openprise. I've been in this role for a little bit over a year, but prior to that, I was on our CS team, implementing, working with all great ops teams and ops professionals. So looking forward to talking about this topic today.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. I probably should have just shown off your headshots and all that kind of stuff. But since we got through the introductions a little ahead of schedule, I'm going to go ahead and show off the agenda for all of you in the audience and those watching after. Today, we're going to get into defining what the AI last mile problem is. We're going to go into a few sort of key areas and topics for the discussions. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the costs of what's going on, some of your skills that you might need to be on the lookout for. And we're going to kind of move through a few other key insights that as you can imagine, we all sat and talked about ahead of time. And I swear we should have just recorded the initial planning session because it was such a good discussion to begin with. So with that, let me tee up a little bit of the conversation, and then we're going to dive into this question. So, for us, the last mile problem was really sort of not an idea that marketingops.com necessarily came up with, but it was brought to us by the Openprise team, and they started challenging the market and asking this both to their prospects and customers, but also to our community. And it's an interesting sort of state of where we're at in the landscape of adopting AI today. The challenge is that go-to-market ops teams today, there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of pilots. There's really just not a lot of trust in letting AI go, like, quote unquote, all the way. And so that usually falls in this category of like, how much access does it really have? What can it do? What can't it do? And it's not showing up in just one particular area. I think the last mile problem of adopting AI and putting it into your systems looks a little different across the board, depending on the size of your organization, both in revenue, but in team size. And so today we're gonna talk a little bit about that. So just to kind of dive in, I want to hear from each of the panelists, what is your take on this last mile problem, and how does it sort of apply in maybe the role that you have today and a little bit of the experience that you've certainly had in the past as well? If you don't mind, I think, Jules, I'm going to call on you, or Popcorn Jules. How are you thinking about this last mile?
Well, I think we're all thinking about AI all at the same time, trying to think about all the different ways in which we can use it. But I think where we're at my current role is we don't necessarily own all of our systems where we want AI to interact. So if we are doing a list upload in a tool, we want to make sure in HubSpot, for example, we don't necessarily own that piece. So we own the tool. We don't necessarily own the list upload piece because it goes through a different, our global technology organization, part of the organization. So we have to think about, if we are building AI and we're trying to automate it, it's not just us who are automating it, or it's not just us who are involved in that process. It's who else is involved in the process. How else do we need to get the other systems to talk to each other? So we can do all the really cool AI things we have. Like, we use a lot of Claude. We have a ton of Claude routines and schedules and everything running in the background all the time. But every time we build something, we have to think about who else is going to be involved in that conversation, because we can't just simply just build and push straight away, because someone else might have to get involved.
I just realized I muted myself. That makes a ton of sense. So you're thinking about what elements, team members, and sort of, I don't know, hurdles of technology you have to navigate around who has access to what solutions and who's it going to touch, right, along this AI adoption lifecycle. Harjit, how are you thinking about this last mile problem?
Sure. So I think this last mile problem is pretty evident for us, given that we are a healthcare company. So to give you a little background, so I work for Lyra Health, and Lyra Health sells mental health as a solution to employees. So once an employer becomes a customer, employees come to us to seek mental health. So it is really patient data. There's a lot of HIPAA compliance that is in place. So we really can't just connect our business systems to our patient data or have Claude or Gemini talk to that patient data. It is very sensitive proprietary data governed by HIPAA. So having our LLMs talk directly to any of our business data is very, very sensitive. So we now have to think about how do we partition data in terms of what our LLMs have access to, what they cannot have access to. So that's our biggest challenge from last mile is giving and partitioning data for LLMs, what they can access to, given that there can be patient data that could be mixed within some of the business data. So that is our challenge right now that we have to solve as part of AI's last mile.
Got you. So if I were kind of like teeing it up, like Jules, right size your company for us just to give us a sense of like where you're tackling this challenge from, about like how big is the company that you're at right now?
700 people ish.
Okay. Yeah. And then Harjit, what about you?
We're around 3,000 people.
Okay. So still, Jules, sizable organization, certainly, maybe a little bit more nimble in the sense of just because it's not 3,000, 3x the size or what have you, but still facing similar challenges. And then I kind of fall into the category of a very small organization that's adopting AI. With that, we have a lot of flexibility on our side. So just to kind of tee up my version of what I believe the last mile problem is for us is that we're able to move pretty quickly, and we can allow these systems to touch a lot of the sort of endpoints, everything from, Claude being a central source of truth for our team members with shared projects and workspaces to integrations that I certainly can or I can approve. We try to exercise caution naturally, but where I find our challenge most often occurs is really just this idea of how do we train people on how to use this solution, and how does it allow us to operate more effectively? And so for us, it's really an adoption of who has access to the tool and how do they learn how to use it. So that's kind of like where we're at. And that's, I think right size to us. We're not up against some of the hurdles of compliance or IT teams, right? We're really just looking at straight up technology adoption and just operational rigor and practice around that. And so I think it looks a little different in every org. Ryan, on your side, what are you seeing from sort of like conversations in the market with Openprise customers and prospects?
Oh, it's interesting because obviously when you work with big enterprise, you have a lot of people where it's just immediately like, I have this great idea, InfoSec stops it. So that last mile to them is so evident that they're like, okay, but I can get everything I need, but then I can't actually get into my system. Meanwhile, firsthand, just experience of who I'm around in my networks, I've seen cases where Mike, like you, a CEO can put in something in, it looks great, he gets acquired, and all of a sudden AI is not touching a single thing that he once did. He did a great job, got everything he needed, and that flexibility when you're small is there. And I find that the most relatable is at Openprise. We are smaller. We can be flexible. However, we're approaching it like we're a big enterprise company, making sure that we're preparing because we handle so much information. We want to be kind of drink our own champagne, as they'd say, and align with like preparing for sharing the data correctly, adjusting it, like making sure we have the guardrails rather than just saying, you should do this, but we don't.
Love that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Because I think, you know, for all of you who are in the audience thinking about your last mile problem, you know, I hope that each of these guests today, myself included, as I kind of guide us through the conversation, can help maybe uncover a few of the key challenges that we're faced with and how we're trying to tackle some of the adoption and how we're thinking about that. And so we're gonna kind of go a little deeper now into the conversation and talk about like, where does it really show up today? You know, Jules, you were talking about sort of Celigo's lack of, or rather your sort of shared ownership of the technology ecosystem. You know, can you dive in a little bit into some of the challenges and how you're currently, you know, you came into the role, you're still kind of learning the landscape of all the teams, right? And how all this interacts. Can you just unpack a few like really concrete examples of where, you know, some of these issues are coming up?
Yeah, of course, obviously, as I mentioned, depending on the ownership and the tool that we're looking at, a really good example is HubSpot list uploads. Sounds pretty simple, but when we have our GTO team, like I said, our kind of IT global technology team, they own basically the list upload process. Obviously, as the marketing ops team, we own getting the list from the marketing teams, making sure they're correct, being able to put it into the system. Prior to getting AI in place, the project would take about 5 days and like 3 or 4 different departments involved in trying to get this list, getting it uploaded, getting it corrected, getting it into our system. So obviously we built AI. We have a Claude routine that just sits there in the background that says when a list comes in through an Asana ticket, Claude can pick that up and it can build out the next ticket essentially for that process. So it checks the data, it sees if there's any duplicates, personal emails that we have to remove, making sure the countries are right. We have a lot of other fields in that spreadsheet. I'm sure you will have a million fields in your spreadsheets for list uploads, but we have to make sure that data is correct to then be able to create the ticket, to put that into Asana, to then have our GTO team to do that list upload. The cool thing is actually in the last literally 2 days, the GTO team is also now automating their list upload process using our own internal tool, which makes that process even quicker again. So I know, I'm very happy.
I'm like, yes.
We went from 3 to 5 days to 24 hours, and now we should be going down to instantly by hopefully the beginning of next week, which is awesome. But we still have to make sure that when we're doing this process and building it, we had to make sure that everything we wrote, everything we have in that routine, that schedule, makes sense to the person we're handing off the data to. If we have 30 lines or 30 columns in a sheet, what do all of these columns mean? Are they in the right order? Is it formatted correctly? Are we removing all the things we said we were going to remove? Because that piece, not only is it important now because the person who was physically doing the manual uploads, who was basically taking the data and pushing the button to get it into HubSpot, was also reviewing that data and making sure it was correct. But now we've automated it again using our own tool internally to be able to do that automation piece. If the data is not correct, that automation is also going to fail. So we have to really think about one, human in the loop of where does that human get involved in, we're going to pass the ticket off. And then now also making sure to get everything correct to get it into the right systems, because now it's not only going from a list upload in Asana to Claude, back to Asana to a person, it's now going all the way through an automation process as well. If we don't have those, it's just going to break. But that's why we always have a human in the loop. We're testing it in Sandbox right now. Our GTO team built this awesome IO flow that we call internally. So they're building that, they're testing it to see if it's going to work. And then once we get that done, hopefully we can be very hands-off with how those uploads are happening. We are using Claude for many, many different ways as well. Unfortunately, we are a massive Claude house, so I apologize. You're going to hear me say it a lot. But we are building flows in HubSpot. We're doing listen segmentation. We are creating emails and putting those straight into HubSpot as well. There is a lot of information that we have between those systems. And now that we know that this IO flow internally is working, we actually want to move a lot of our automations that we have in Claude into our own internal systems as well. It has AI built into it. It has a thing called Aura. So once we get that built in as well, we actually then have less usage in Claude, more usage in our own internal tool, and hopefully less humans involved in some of the things that the things we don't want to have to do every day. I don't want to have our team or any other team uploading lists every single day, 3 or 4 times a day sometimes. If we can automate that and have AI take care of all of that for us, and that's really what we're aiming for.
Yeah, I love that. I I happened to do a podcast recording this morning, and they asked me what it was like a hot take question about what's the most overrated thing in MarTech today. It was like AI. they looked at me like, what? I was like, well, I mean, if I had to be really specific, it's Claude in some ways. But if it's AI generally, it's the justification for my answer was exactly what you just illustrated, Jules. And it was that there's a lot of hard work that goes into making sure the AI can do the things that allow you to scale and do more efficiently, right? But it's we talk about it all the time in the community. Begin with the end in mind, right? If you know that the output is supposed to be XYZ in service of ABC effort, then you can instrument all the stuff pre and in the middle of the process to let AI sort of navigate through. And then you absolutely should have a human in the loop, right? Like to make sure as much as is needed to make sure that it's still valid. So anyway, really, really interesting.
It takes me back to, I don't know if anyone started in the world of marketing automation when we first started. It's like, hang on, it's automation. It should just do its thing. You just open it up and it magically works. That's what people used to, obviously managers, whoever they were, used to think C-suite with like automation just does a thing. I think that's happening now with AI. AI can take over everything. AI can just do its thing. It can't because, one, we have to sometimes babysit the robot and make sure we're clicking the buttons to let it do it as allow processes. But also, if we don't get it right, it's just going to like it doesn't just you can't just magically open it and it just works. There's a lot of effort that my team puts into having all of these routines running, to have all these scheduled tasks running. It does mean that sometimes that one of my team actually has like 5 Claude windows open all at the same time, but he's able to do those 5 tasks whilst also doing other work.
Right. Yeah. My ADD is not getting any support in the use of AI today. It's just getting worse.
And clicking allow.
Yeah, I was going to comment on that. How many of you in the chat have you sat and just like, oh yeah, allow. I don't know about you, but there's moments where I'm like, I actually have no idea what the heck I'm allowing, but I'm just like,
I don't know if I want to scroll back and read
none of
all
you
that.
on enterprise companies ever admit to that, but me, I'm sitting there like, yeah, you can look at that document. It's fine. So anyway, it's funny. Yeah. Spamming the allow button is like, yeah, you have to have somebody there. Harjit, I would love to hear about where the last mile is showing up, particularly in a heavily compliant environment. You had a really interesting use case around how AI can and cannot touch certain elements of data. And I would love for you to unpack a little bit about where you're seeing it show up.
Yeah. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, we are in healthcare space and we are governed by HIPAA compliance around what all data can be exposed. And it's pretty, everything that connects to an LLM needs to go through a privacy and security team, every single use case, right? So it makes a little hard, but it's important too for business that we don't put our business into jeopardy because of that. But on the business side, on the marketing and sales side, I think we hit some roadblocks there. Is that since our LLMs cannot talk to directly our business systems because of HIPAA compliance right now, is that we are not able to connect things like Gemini or Claude to Marketo, Salesforce, our analytics tool, and that limits the visibility that we want on an account level, the ability to create segmentation, the ability to create processes, as Jules was mentioning about creating list uploads directly into systems, leveraging Claude. So those are our limitations right now. We're working through it, but it takes time for us to define every single use case, trying to get approval for that, and then work towards that. And also, given that for us, Claude has currently been just rolled out to the engineering team, our business teams don't have access to it. We use Gemini for that. And one of the limitations that we have seen is that Gemini, as an example, where most of the companies that are sort of Google shops, I would say, have access to Gemini. But Gemini, unless you have Gemini Enterprise, you cannot connect to Salesforce. And also, a lot of the vendors that we work with in MarTech or revenue technology, they'll build their MCP tools, which are either for OpenAI or Claude. So there's been limited development on the Gemini side, unless you have to start to build your own MCP servers. Then for our cases, as we start to do custom development, that's another layer for privacy and regulations that comes in, right? Anything custom needs to be vetted further. So that's how sort of the last mile shows up for us, that every single use case needed to be vetted by privacy. The systems that we work with, we cannot connect to them right now. And also the vendors that we work with do not have connections set up for Gemini. So that's how those limitations are showing up for us.
And then you, I remember we touched on a bit of a workaround that you have available to you, and that could be maybe a little bit of an unlock for people who are tuning in right now. Do you want to? I don't want to like reveal the moment, but like, what is your workaround for some of this?
Yeah. So I think one of the things, as I was talking about earlier, is account research being a very common use case for our sales teams these days. And as a salesperson, like we use Gemini, we have created gems, and they could use a gem to do an account research, but you have to do one by one in account research. And your internal signals are not plugged into it. Like your Salesforce activity is not plugged into Gemini right now. So how do you bring all that data together without touching your internal systems like Salesforce? So we've tried to rely more on AI native solutions. Like one of our workaround has been as we use Common Room for account research. So we have predefined set of 8,000 accounts in our TAM that we have predefined prompts standardized across all those 8,000 accounts. And now all that account research shows up in Common Room, and it works as a Chrome extension in Chrome next to Salesforce. So let's say you're a salesperson, you open up a sales account in Salesforce, you can open up the Chrome extension and you can see all that account research showing up right there next to the account that you can leverage for your outreach. So now the data is not in Salesforce, but you still have all the insights that has been shown to you leveraging an external vendor. So that's been our workaround.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the creative solutioning, and again, as I continue to sort of like hammer on the drum, beat on the drum of like, this is why having experts in your go-to-market sort of tech stack and product management, the humans, folks like yourself and those who are attending and listening, that's why we're so important, is that we need to come up with these workarounds to adhere to the policies that are in place, and basically iframing in data to sit next to your live instance of your CRM. So it's not, technically touching the database. You're still able to accomplish some of the goals. And I found that really like fascinating from your earlier story. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And for those of you listening, hopefully you can absorb some of these ideas, and perhaps you could do kind of the same. As I jump into sharing a little bit of where I've seen AI run into a very specific example of a last mile problem. And if you hear my dogs, I apologize. They're excited that someone's here visiting. I'm going to share a poll question with the audience. And if you don't mind, just give us your sort of insights around how accessible is your go-to-market data to AI today. And so you should be able to see the poll showing up, and you can kind of put in your votes, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. But if I can, I'll share where we've experienced some issues with the last mile problem. And I think this is particularly interesting. I think I'm observing something that, well, hopefully the market can prove me wrong about this, but where we were implementing AI, we also are a Claude shop, Jules. And so we were hooked up, or I am hooked up to HubSpot. And naturally, I wanted to maybe build out a segment to send an email communication out to the database. And as a small team, I have the flexibility to decide on whether I use sort of the native app or the MCP. And I've found that the MCP sort of integration tends to be a little bit more powerful for Claude to HubSpot. And in our case, I was asking it to pull a segment for me. And what it did is sort of fetched a whole bunch of data properties that I was looking for. And it did that really well. And it said, great, I can go build this list for you. And I was like, wonderful. Like, can you please, build the dynamic list? Well, long story short, if you're not familiar with HubSpot, it has, much like many other marketing automation platforms, it has the ability to put in and or logic, throughout the segments, right? And so that creates a smart segment, something that's live and constantly being updated. And we're all familiar with that concept. Well, the challenge is that Claude can't build that, right? It can't. I mean, it can. I could hook it up to the Claude browser tab and have it literally go click on the screen and go build out the smart segment for me. But gosh, that's really inefficient. Even if I could do that in 5 Chrome tabs and go do something else on the side, it's just a waste of tokenization and time. And really all it could do was push this static list with these rules based on the data that I had looked for. And I think this, for me, is the moment where I went, oh, right. Why would HubSpot or any other technology provider want you to be able to do the thing that they natively do really well with a tool that sits outside? Like, of course they wouldn't want that. In fact, it makes perfect sense. They charge for seats. They charge for usage. Like, there's so many reasons why they need to try to make money, where they're going to say, we want you to be able to interact with AI, but we don't want you to do the things that are core to our tool. And if you can do it, it's going to be with our AI that we built ourselves, right? And so I'm postulating that, perhaps this will never come to fruition. I may never be able to let Claude build me a dynamic list and have it constantly be updated moving forward, because HubSpot wants that to live inside of their system of record. And that's their mode. And I think that's a really important thing for all of us to try to absorb, where those limitations lie in AI adoption, and especially a third-party AI adoption. Because imagine for a moment if somebody is to hire a new rep who's literally never interacted with HubSpot or Marketo or any other tool, and then they try to do what I just did, and they have no idea that smart segment doesn't need to run on a cycle of tokens costing you a lot of money to do that every single night or day or hour or whatever. And they just think that's the norm, right? Oh, that's just how you do it because Claude can do this. And it's like, no, you actually should go build that. There's a better use case for that, right? And so if you can articulate the reason why you want someone to have domain expertise and how go-to-market technology functions in service of the business, even at the tool specific levels, this is a moment for you to do that, right? For you to say, hey, you need people to be in charge of this tech stack, and here is why, because you end up wasting money on things that you just don't need to waste money on. So, the bottom line is, if you're going to make a decision on whether you use native AI features or you're bringing your own model, I think it comes down to whether it's convenient and whether it's cost effective or not. And just keep an eye on kind of what's going on. So I'm going to pin this to the screen real quick. Here's our poll results. Maybe a couple of quick reactions. Wow. So how accessible is your go-to-market data to AI today? And 60% of you say you restrict access due to compliance or privacy concerns. Ryan, what do you think?
Someone's sneaking in there saying they haven't given access yet. Earlier it was 0. And I was going to say, I'm not surprised, given that all the ops folks that come and are part of this community want to be pushing the limits, but I'm sorry for the few people that had to vote no AI access yet.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, I'm surprised that there's restricted access. I think we've seen some lawsuits come about, and everybody's like, I don't want to be that person or company for that matter, right? Jules, any thoughts, any reactions on this?
Definitely interesting to see how many restricted due to compliance and privacy concerns, especially with the tools. The tools now have much better controls around how we want to access different systems. So we have connections in our Claude. We can pick which ones we want to connect to. If the IT team has approved it, the GTO team has approved it, and they very much restrict the access that we have connected to as well. So really great example, going to go back to HubSpot. Claude has a native HubSpot integration, which is good, does some very basic stuff. But for the MOPS team to be able to do what we're needing to do, we had to get a private app access to connect to Claude, which gives us much more access into the tool. But this was decided and defined with us alongside the GTO team, who is holistically owning everything. So we was like, this is what we need access to, and these are our use cases of why we need to have this private app. The native integration will do some things, but the actual direct private app integration will do much more advanced tools for us, and that's why we have all of those routines running, because if we didn't have those running, if we didn't have the private app, we couldn't have any of those running, and it just takes up more time. But it is very much a use case by use case between any of our connectors, whether it's HubSpot to our own internal tool, HubSpot to Claude, Claude to Salesforce. Like we have read-only into Salesforce, so we can read reports, read or write access into like Google, for example. So it all is they're much more restrictive on how you can control that access. So it's interesting seeing so many people are still, I think, a little scared of what it can do. But obviously, as we all know, we have that allow button to say, yes, we want to do this, or we don't want to do this, as long as you read it. But also, I think if you're working with the IT teams really closely and saying, actually, there may be some concerns, but this is what I need this access for, and you can literally customize those connections to help alleviate some of those compliance and privacy concerns.
Yeah, that makes sense. Arjun, I imagine you're seeing kind of having similar response to the reaction on this poll here.
Yeah, I'm glad to see so many of my friends here, so that people are in a similar boat. But I think it's understandable too that businesses are assessing the risk of giving access to the business data, and how, like, trying to weigh their option. Like, is it the insights that they get from Claude or from Gemini are more beneficial than losing hands on your business data and having that become public, right? So I think this is it shows where everybody is sitting, that they have their hands tied to what can be connected. I was just sharing other examples, is that people become antsy. They want to use tools. They want to build different applications. Even in MOPS, like we get antsy that we really want to do these things. And I recently saw that our IT team even restricted the export access on reports from Salesforce, because people were building reports, de-anonymizing to some extent, and putting them in Claude to do analysis, right? So companies are becoming restrictive on what you can even export, because if you're not able to do direct connections, even export is becoming a lot more restrictive for people to take it outside and do analysis. So, but there has to be some middle ground that needs to be built up that can be good for the business and for the teams to explore new things.
Yeah, totally. I know we covered a little bit of this like through some of your answers before. So I want to give you a moment to add any other sort of thoughts around what you've done to sort of cross the gap between AI adoption. You know, Harjit, you talked about putting things alongside data and sort of avoiding it touching the system. Jules, I know you've touched on a number of sort of elements around, the processes that go through and the documentation, but for us, it's just making sure that the AI is doing what it's really good at and not necessarily doing the things that are sort of a waste of time, and just ensuring that we're focusing our efforts where the juice is worth the squeeze. But any other sort of like passing thoughts that you want to add on to how you sort of like, close the gap here? I'll start with you, Jules.
Honestly, documentation. I know everyone hates documentation, but we have tools to make it quicker for us now. But that's a huge thing. As long as we have everything, the process documented, because even though it's AI, and again, it's still running in the background, it's doing its thing. If we don't understand what the thing is that it's doing, someone may see a routine that's running, or they may be like, hang on, why have I got this notification for something? If everyone understands what each of those processes are, what each of those routines are, why they're working, how they're working, where it hands off between different systems, it makes it much easier for one, compliance processes, obviously, but also to have those conversations to say, we've built this thing, it's going to hand off to you. This is the process in which we've built. And also in refining those processes. One thing I didn't talk about in the list upload piece was when we first built that list upload process to get into Asana, the description that we built was very, very detailed, very long, very, very long. There was a lot of detail in it. And so we got obviously feedback from the team doing the uploads. Were like, actually, I don't need to read this entire War and Peace that you just given me. I need these 5 pertinent points. So we rebuilt and adjusted where we needed to, so that when we're putting those descriptions in, it is much more succinct and to the point. And again, having that conversation, not just I'm going to build it in a silo. I'm going to build it knowing that everyone else is going to get involved. I'm going to document that process so everyone is aware of what's going to happen and when, and where they get involved as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm pausing because I'm like, I don't know. It brings a big smile to my face, as you can see when we talk about documentation. Like, it's just so critical to everything today. And I think it's, well, what a wonderful time to be alive with AI doing all of what it can do for us. But suddenly everybody's realizing just how critical the systems and processes that need to be the baseline, how critical those established processes need to be in order to make this stuff effective. So really fun. We talk about that all the time in the community, right? So
I love it.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to add one thing. One thing I love is that for Jules' case, it's builders building something for the users. So that documentation, like just the editing it, rather than at first maybe her documentation was built for her. It was the builder for the builder explaining everything it does, but rather adapting and kind of all the tools people are building with AI typically aren't directly for them when they're the ops person. It's for everyone else to make them self-service and make our jobs a little bit easier, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is different. I mean, when documentation is for the operations person, there might be things in there that really we care a lot about, but an end user whose outcome is I just want XYZ to happen, they don't need, to your point, like what Jules was saying, they don't need all the extra stuff, right? They just need to kind of understand the key points of why do I need this and what's going to happen next. And I think that clarity is super helpful. So if I could, we have more to come, another poll question coming up in just a moment. And we're going to start talking a little bit about AI costs, but just to sort of reflect back on where we've been in this conversation. Look, it's sort of like the same last mile gap that everybody's sort of tackling. Jules has outlined that there's an ownership and people problem. It's not always about what's going to happen, but it's who owns it and who's going to be operating those solutions. Harjit, you've got a regulatory trust problem. You're sort of like owning the systems that are being sort of blocked, but you have to sort of find ways creatively to connect them back into the ecosystem. And for me, it's really just an economics problem, right? I can give things full access, but I'm realizing that that's just sort of a waste of time. And I think commonly it's about like there's a lot of focus on convenience, but it's just as important to focus on the capabilities. And these tools, ultimately, to Ryan's point, they need to live where the end user lives, right? You need to think about what the reps are going to be doing and how they need to interact with it, how a marketer is going to work with it, and try to move people along through the systems that they're familiar with, but enable them to move more efficiently. So I want to sort of shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the costs that we're experiencing with AI. We're going to put this poll out to all of you to try to understand how you're managing the costs. So that should be available in just a moment, and we'll come back to that. So yeah, let's talk about AI costs. What are you running into right now, Jules, around the usage, and how are you governing that? Like what's going on with AI costs and adoption for you?
This is definitely an interesting one. Because I think so many people don't realize that AI actually costs to run things, not all the time, and you can hit limits very, very quickly. We've recently had kind of AI usage limits imposed across the organization from the IT team, which is good because people could be spending $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month on AI. And if you've got 400 people using it, I don't know what our number is, but if it was that many people, like the costs can spiral out of control very, very quickly. So the IT team, rightly so, put those restrictions in place. What happened for us as the MOPS team, because we have a lot of routines running, because we have a lot of automations running, we hit those limits really quickly. We are apparently the second team behind the engineering team that is using the most AI credits because of what we're running, which is great. But obviously, as part of that, we had to speak to the IT team, explain to them the things that we were running, the routines and the schedules, etc. Look at our credit usage, and then once we start to look at our credit usage, we're able to do things like flip between the different models to see where that credit usage lies. We can now tweak those models to keep a good eye on where can we bring that usage cost down. And then every time anything's being built, we ask it, the tool Claude, to kind of estimate what that usage cost might look like. Because the one thing my team does very closely is we keep an eye on our usage very, very closely all the time. Kind of once a week, we'll go in and look and see where we're at in our limits. Because like I said, we have one of the highest usage limits now across the organization behind engineering. We have one of the highest budgets across behind engineering. So we want to make sure that, one, we're not hitting that limit. I don't want to be hitting that limit all the time. So how can we refine the tools that we have to take into account that piece? Because again, I don't want to be spending money that we don't need to spend. And as I mentioned previously, if we can start to pull some of those routines that are happening on a regular basis into our own tool, then our cost is obviously going to start to decrease for one third-party tool and may increase for our internal tool. But at least we're using our own tool internally as well. So it's really kind of also paying attention to what's running all the time. Is it running 3 times a day, once a day, 8 o'clock in the morning every morning? Is it something that needs to run for a long period of time? And then we're building up those big projects. Some of these big projects, I ran one the other day. It was pretty large. It took me like 3 or 4 days to have Claude run through this big thing that I was doing. And I literally was watching my credits and my tokens do this. And I was like, okay, at what point should I stop this thing and say, okay, I want to simplify this whole ask that I've done, and how can we bring that down? Actually, Cameron on my team actually took what we were working on and actually then started to compare what I'd done, what someone else had done, and what he's built to look at that usage as well. So we actually like compare and contrast to see where does that usage come from and how can we reduce it. That's the important piece, because again, if you're just let free to build and build and build and build and think, oh, this is a really cool thing I can get AI to do, you start ramping up that credit and that amount very, very quickly.
Yeah. I've encountered that myself. I even, as like a Claude sort of default setting for my own account, I've said like, I've instructed it to say, use the most cost-effective model to try to like execute this work. I have yet to validate whether it actually does that. So to be fair, it's probably still using whatever model I have it toggled on. But I think it's important to spend time trying to understand which each of the models, in Claude, for example, what the difference between like an Opus 4.5 or an Opus 5 or what have you, at what point do I need to use different ones? And I will be the first to admit, I don't know half of what I should know about those. It's probably an area where I need to spend some time learning, more about the capabilities for sure. But so really interesting that you're sort of like intentionally trying to measure it and keep an eye on it. Not surprised whatsoever that your team is like the second highest, if not the highest usage. I think a lot of us are going to experience that over the years too. Harjit, I would love to hear where's your head at around cost constraints and managing them across the board at your organization.
Yeah, no, I think as our workaround has been in using the native AI functionalities and leveraging them within the existing vendors to create a sort of a workable solution for our sales and marketing team, we have to be very mindful of our usage upfront. So as an example, as we were talking about our workaround of doing account research, leveraging Common Room, we are doing account research. We cannot just do account research on n number of accounts. Our contract size is bound by number of accounts on which we can do account research. So we have to be mindful of our TAM, what accounts are that we need to prioritize. So we have to work along with our GTM team to say, we've got 20,000 accounts in our TAM, but not everything can be enriched. What is a tier 1 for you? So if we've got tier 1, 2, and 3, these are 10,000 accounts. We plan for account enrichment upfront, that these are the 10,000 accounts. And this is what our contract is going to be. And that contract, the account size of 10,000 accounts is going to define the contract value. So our contract value is directly tied to it. So if we need to increase the number of accounts, we need to increase the contract also with our vendors. So that's how we have to plan upfront very carefully on accounts that need to be researched and what's going to be in our ICP.
I almost started talking while being muted again. That is really insightful. And I think, again, for anybody watching now or in the follow-on, a really clear advocation for why I firmly believe the future of our profession is becoming go-to-market product managers and go-to-market product architects that translate the business's unique sort of go-to-market hypothesis to the current or lacking capabilities in the tech stack that you need to invest in. What I heard from Harjit just now is that he's sitting alongside their go-to-market teams to understand and define that ICP and that TAM and refine so that they can optimize the delivery of that tech stack to service the needs of the business, because it is just not possible to affordably go enrich an entire whatever. How many thousands of it was it for your
10,000 accounts that we
Yeah.
are doing right now, but that like we've got more than 20,000 that we have in play. So
Yeah. See, like that's insanity, right? Like, and also just like, I don't care if AI can sift through it faster. Like, it's just a lot. It's just a lot, right? Like, you need to keep people like, I said it actually on the podcast this morning too, like aim small, miss small, right? If we just focus in our efforts, we can try to land and expand more. And so I appreciate that, just to go back to what I was saying, this role advocating for sitting alongside your go-to-market leaders and helping them translate what they're trying to do to what you have in place today, and advocate for your product roadmap to service the needs of the business. Just can't champion that enough. So Ryan, are you encountering anything around AI costs? You know, I'm such a small org. It's just like, we're going to pay for it monthly. I really, that's my biggest challenge, is just making sure nobody uses too many tokens overnight. But yeah, I would love to sort of hear where you're at around, you know, thinking about how like AI fits into all this stuff, and maybe talk a little bit about how Openprise fits into the mix. And yeah, we can see.
Yeah, so I'll definitely tie into it on my section, but like what we do see a lot is, I mean, Jules kind of hit on it earlier, or did as well, is like sometimes you're asking it to do the same thing again and again, or you're trying to control what you're giving it. And what's funny is in many cases, maybe someone's saying, well, I can only give it particular information, but they're not even taking the step to prepare that data. So AI is having to spend all these tokens just to make sense of the data schema, rather than just doing simple like prepping so that it can answer the question of like, how many customers did I have in the last 12 months? Rather, it's trying to make sense of all your custom fields, when a little bit of preparation could have had a huge impact on your token usage.
That's one of my favorite questions, by the way, Ryan. And I'm going to pull this up, and then we'll talk about the poll results as I reflect on what you just shared as well. But one of my favorite questions is like, you know, it sounds like such a simple question to ask, right? Like, how many customers did I have this last month or this last year? Well, how do you define customer, Ryan? So, you know, it's like, oh, you're right. Like there's rules, right, to this.
Like,
just because they're like closed one doesn't mean, you know, anyway. So it's important to have those foundations in place.
Oh, definitely.
Let's just take a look here. So folks, you in the audience are saying that someone else on their team is sort of owning that, and it's not them. You know, any reactions to this? I'm actually kind of like simultaneously surprised and not surprised. I would encourage you all to try to take the steps to partner up with your IT and finance teams, and just show that you have a vested interest in it, more from the lens of like, I want to adopt this more, and I want to be cognizant of what it's costing us, and so how can I do that in service of the business? Because if you're kind of just like, well, they'll tell me what my budget is, I think it'll be hard for you to like advocate for why you need more. But yeah, Jules, any thoughts here?
Obviously, we know that IT pretty much owns it all the time. So yeah, to your point, Mike, having that conversation with them, especially if you do find that you're hitting limits, or you think, oh, actually, I can't do this because I don't have the credits for it. Tokens, I never know what to call them. But when you if you have those conversations, be like, actually, these are the use cases that we want to be able to build. Can we test them, try them, increase credit limits? Like having those conversations makes it much easier for everyone to understand what you're working on. But yeah, I mean, IT, the tech team who are going to own the tool are going to manage it because they're the ones who are going to start seeing those bills coming through. And I'm sure some organizations have had very big bills because they're like, we have to AI everything. And then don't take into account that sometimes AI could cost more than hiring a person to do the job. But so having those conversations is really helpful.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Well, in the interest of time, Harjit, I would normally ask you to also chime in, but we're running out of time. So I want to give credit to where credit is due here. Openprise has helped us curate this panel for this discussion. And so far it's been really insightful for me, and I hope for all of you. But I do want to just spend a minute to talk about where Openprise can fit into this equation. I will say y'all are just incredible partners of the value of educating our community. And so, I really appreciate you taking the time to sort of like tee this up and think about tactically, how someone can learn how Openprise and solving this last mile problem and some of the barriers that you're up against. So Ryan, I would love for you to just kind of share a little bit more about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go ahead and try to hit on the things that are most valuable inside of this in the interest of time. And one of them that made me laugh, Mike, you teed it up earlier for me when you were like Mike joked about the customers, is to kind of hit on this on that blast radius one. One of the examples we see the most is data is now at like your C-suite's fingertips. They type in and say, tell me my customers for the last 12 months. And it doesn't get that buffer of the senior manager, the manager that explains that, yeah, we had to create 3 accounts for that one opportunity because of a partner relationship. So it kind of has made AI, this blast radius and how easily accessible things are, has been really, really good and bad because now these ops things we normally had a buffer for are gone. On top of that, you have decay, you have the hallucination. I won't emphasize what everyone's already heard from plenty of conferences, but just the what if, I know from my time being a consultant, being around ops, is it's so painful that a small mistake or an assumptive mistake seems to outlive every project we ever work. It undermines that great idea you had because AI or a human made one mistake that was fixed 10 months ago. And now they doubt the next thing you're doing. So in this same space, you have hallucinations kind of pushing that, or even just not thought out projects. And with the complexity that we're seeing, as everyone hit on this, it deserves to be complex. It needs to be planned out and documented clearly so that you get InfoSec approval, but then you have buy-in from the end users, like Jules explained, giving them what they need to be successful. But one of the key things on this slide that I like to highlight is look at where, we didn't just throw AI as little dots on here. Contrary, I'm not a designer, but there's a reason where it falls. It's sitting on your middleware, point solutions, everything else, and it's not typically, unless you're fortunate enough, maybe using some native AI stuff, it's not on your CRM. It's not on your MAP or your ERP. You're stuck kind of behind that InfoSec wall that's leaving you where you're doing 80%, 90% of awesome stuff. And then you're like, allow to load. If you're lucky enough to have it integrated enough to click allow, or you're having to download that file of the list or the research you just did and then have to load it into your CRM or MAP. And that's kind of where we're seeing AI orbit right now. And I don't think it's an accident. Maybe it's a phase for everyone's benefit. We'll all get a little more efficient. But right now, the security team made a pretty solid, honest, reasonable decision to create this buffer. And that's the last mile we're seeing. Kind of one picture. The models may be ready, but the systems aren't, or security is not ready to approve it. So where do we see closing the gap with InfoSec? And how do you go to a team that's already told you no when you have a cool idea? I'm sure they don't enjoy saying no. Maybe they're not like procurement with one job to make them save money, but there's risk. And I don't think you're going to get AI tomorrow connected depending on the size of your org without proposing some sort of governance and putting a layer in the middle that is like a firewall. Have this sit between your systems where Openprise can come into play. Have it sit between your systems. This is to buffer those hallucinations. It's so you're not going to InfoSec saying, hey, I want to connect to my CRM. I want to connect to this endpoint system. In the same place, you're taking control of what these AI agents can see, like Harjot explained earlier. You're able to prep that data, minimize token usage, also control what it's actually able to see, and then have it come back through in a deterministic, controlled way. Jules kind of highlighted the need for a human in the loop at times, or to what scale, so that you can actually get outcomes into your target system. This is to avoid kind of that need for a perpetual permission slip, though I'm not saying sneak around. You still want to get buy off, but this is going to put ops teams in a place where they're not in a codependent middleware with AI, where they have to ask IT, can we please? They get permission, they explain, they document thoroughly, as Jules explained, and get sign off to actually be able to get AI sourced information to the endpoints and make it actionable the way they want to.
I appreciate it, Ryan. Thank you again, Openprise, for helping to help this discussion along, host this panel with us at marketingops.com, and to Jules and Harjit. I've run out of time today. We were going to talk a little bit about, these quote unquote new ops skills that are needed. I will say, I don't think there's a whole lot new here for us as marketing operations practitioners or go-to-market ops practitioners. It's just a lot of the same, translating business needs to the capabilities of technology. And so, I'm gonna just kind of go out on a limb and say that I don't think that they're new, but I think throughout this conversation, you've heard little nuggets of opportunity for you to advocate for your role, for your team, for your function, for your processes to enable you to support your organization. And I would encourage you to come back and reflect on this session, capture the notes that you found valuable, reach out to myself, Jules, Harjit, or Ryan if you have any additional sort of like thoughts, input, or what have you. And thank you, Ben, for giving us a shout out. And spend the time to go to bat for your role and for how you can help an organization achieve more scale and flexibility in adopting AI. And hopefully we can all cross the sort of quote unquote last mile problem together, no matter what size organization we're all in. And so I just want to say thank you again to everybody who was in the audience, Jules and the team. Thanks for answering some of the questions that did come through. I apologize we didn't have time for Q&A. Please come reach out to us in the community. We can come back to these questions. We are absolutely here for it. Come join us and we'll chat more there. But thank you all for your time. Jules, Ryan, Harjit, I really appreciate it. And until next time, please, everybody, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.